She was a Navy SEAL bleeding into the snow, her breath ragged, her body failing, but her arms refused to release the German shepherd who had dragged her out of the ocean and kept her alive through the storm. And he was a quiet lighthouse veterinarian, a man who had sworn he would never lose another soul to the sea. When Dr. Harlan Mercer found Saren Lockhart collapsed beneath his pier, her dog shielding her from the Atlantic wind, he faced a choice that could cost him everything. Saren begged him not to call for help, whispering that the people hunting her would kill them both if he made a single wrong move. What Harlan did next would ignite a battle neither of them were prepared for. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and if this story reaches your heart, please subscribe for more. A December storm swept icy Atlantic spray across the wooden docks of Mariner's Hollow as the coastal town huddled under shuddering winds. That night, Dr. Harlan Mercer, 38, tall with a broad, work-worn frame, dark brown hair threaded with premature silver, and a neatly trimmed beard outlining a face that looked both gentle and haunted, locked the glass door of the Harbor Light Animal Clinic with the quiet precision of a man who had lost the luxury of rushing. His deep-set blue eyes, framed by lines that grief had carved more than age, drifted as they always did toward the far end of the pier where the rescue boats moored. His late wife, Leora, a search and rescue nurse whose warm smile once matched her copper-red hair, had been carried away by those waters 6 winters earlier. Since then, Harlan walked through life with a soft voice, deliberate kindness for every creature he treated, and a loneliness that clung to him like sea mist. Tonight, exhaustion pulled at his shoulders after a 14-hour day, yet something in the night air, sharp, metallic, almost trembling, made his breath slow and his instincts tighten. Then he heard it, a guttural, broken whimper, not the sharp screech of a gull or the scuttle of a raccoon, but something deeper, threaded with pain. Harlan paused, every muscle tightening. He had developed a strange sensitivity to distress sounds after the trauma of losing Leora. He could no longer ignore suffering without feeling it echo inside his ribs. With caution edging each step, he descended the slick wooden stairs leading beneath the pier, where barnacle-coated pillars rose like ancient, frost-bitten legs out of churning black water. The storm shoved waves hard against the beams, flinging cold spray onto his face. As he pushed aside a sheet of torn fishing net tangled against a crate, his breath caught. A massive German shepherd lay curled around a human body, as if shielding it from the entire Atlantic. The dog, 4-year-old Kestrel, as he would later learn, was a striking blend of sable black and burnished gold, muscles coiled tight beneath soaked fur, amber eyes fierce despite the tremor in his flank. He looked bred for discipline and danger, but the way he loomed protectively over his wounded partner spoke of devotion rather than aggression. Beneath him, half buried in wet snow and grit, was a woman. Harlan knelt, heart thundering. She was unlike anyone he expected to find under a storm-struck pier. Saren Lockhart, 34, tall and athletic, with the defined musculature of someone forged through hardship, her dark hair cut blunt at the shoulders and plastered to her pale, dirt-smeared skin. Even unconscious, her angular jaw and straight nose gave her a fierce, almost defiant beauty, yet the slackness in her features betrayed agony. Her tactical clothing, mottled black and charcoal, was shredded at the left shoulder where blood trickled steadily, painting the snow in streaks of iron. Harlan reached for his phone on instinct, hands already shaking from the cold and the sight of the wound. But before he could press a button, Serene's hand shot up with startling speed for someone half-conscious. Her fingers, cold and calloused, clamped around his wrist with the strength of someone trained to overpower threats even while dying. Her dark gray eyes flickered open, stormy, unfocused, yet burning with alarm. "No, no police, no hospital," she rasped, voice raw as if scraped over gravel. "Protocol Gray, if they trace any signal, all of us die." Her words, though fractured, carried not fear but absolute certainty. Harlan froze, absorbing each syllable. She wasn't panicking, she was warning him. A person like her didn't scare easily. Someone had done this to her, and whoever they were, she was certain they could find her again. A sharp gust sliced through the pier, and between the gaps of the wooden planks above, Harlan saw something that turned his spine to ice. Out on the water, half shrouded in sleet, a fishing vessel crept into view. Its hull was matte black, lights almost entirely off except for the faintest glow in the wheelhouse. Not a working boat, not in this storm. It moved too slowly, too deliberately, cutting arcs across the bay like a predator scenting wounded prey. A memory stabbed through him the night the Coast Guard brought him Leora's empty life vest. A storm, a boat with its lights low, a search, no one survived. His chest tightened painfully. He knew danger on the ocean by instinct. This wasn't coincidence. Harlan swallowed hard, adrenaline sharpening his senses until colors brightened, sounds thinned, time seemed to stretch. Kestrel growled low, the kind of sound that vibrated through bone. Seren's grip loosened only when she saw the recognition in Harlan's eyes. The moment he understood this wasn't an accident, and he wasn't a bystander anymore. "Please," she whispered, voice cracking around the edges. "Help him first, then me. Don't call anyone. They'll come." Harlan looked from her to the dark ship and back again. Logic screamed for him to run, but grief had hollowed him in such a way that he could not abandon someone helpless in the cold. Not again. With a shuddering breath, he made his choice. He hoisted Saren's limp body over his shoulder, muscles burning, then guided Kestrel beside him up the slick steps. The German shepherd pressed close, limping but alert, refusing to leave her side. The storm howled like a warning siren as Harlan shoved open the back door of the clinic, dragged them both inside, bolted it shut, and switched off the front lights. In the dim glow of his emergency lantern, he stared at the injured seal and the loyal dog who refused to let her fall, and he knew that by choosing to save them, he had stepped into a battle he didn't yet understand, but one he could no longer walk away from. Sleet swept across the narrow clinic windows with a brittle hiss as Harlan Mercer, his broad shoulders tight with determination, his jaw set in the solid, quiet resolve of a man who had already lost too much, worked over the stainless steel table. His fingers, strong yet trembling with urgency, stitched through Kestrel's torn flank beneath the flickering emergency lantern. The German shepherd, 4 years old, sable black with burnished gold along his spine, lay rigid but conscious, amber eyes locked on his wounded partner, as though his gaze alone could hold her to life. Saren Lockhart lay slumped on the secondary table, her athletic frame motionless except for shallow, ragged breaths that fogged the chilled air. Her dark, blunt-cut hair clung to her temples, blood soaked into the shredded tactical fabric clinging to her shoulder, and her gray eyes, sharp even in pain, fluttered open only long enough to push out the words that bound Harlan's actions. "Save him first. That's an order." Harlan's heart wrenched as he finished suturing Kestrel, running a steadying hand over the dog's trembling ribs. Then he pivoted to Saren. She looked smaller now, still powerful, still built of resilience and years of unforgiving training, but fragile in a way that stabbed straight into Harlan's chest. He injected what little lidocaine he had left. "I can't put you under," he murmured, his low voice thick with worry. "If they're tracking signals, a sedated patient is impossible to move." Saren only nodded once, jaw clenched into a line of steel. The extraction began. Harlan dug his fingers into blood-warmed muscle to locate the embedded round. The instant he probed the wound, Saren's back arched, her breath hitching into a sound that lived somewhere between a gasp and a suppressed scream. Sweat slicked her forehead despite the cold. The monitor at her side began to stutter, dropping into a thin, faltering whine as though her heartbeat were abandoning its duty. Harlan felt panic slice through him, sharp, instinctive, unwelcome, until a sudden thump echoed in the small room. Kestrel dragged himself upright, stumbled to Seren's side, and pressed his muzzle against her limp hand. The dog let out a trembling, broken whine, a plea, a command, a memory of all their battles side by side. Saren's chest surged, her pulse fluttered back, and in that flicker of life Harlan seized the chance. He retrieved the bullet with a final firm push and sealed the wound with swift, efficient stitches. His breath fogged the air as he stepped back, shoulders shaking from adrenaline. "We can't stay here," he whispered, glancing toward the clinic's darkened windows. "They'll come." Saren, half-conscious, barely murmured, "Then run." But Harlan Mercer had never run, not from storms, not from grief, not from death, and he refused to start tonight. Instead, he helped Saren upright, slinging her arm across his muscled shoulder while guiding Kestrel beside them. Just before dawn, with the storm dwindling to a thick gray fog gliding across the harbor, Harlan led them to the old wooden skiff moored at the private slip behind the clinic. The boat, weathered by decades of Mercer family fishing trips, creaked faithfully beneath their weight. Harlan's hands, broad and scarred from years of treating everything from feral cats to panicked wolves, untied the mooring rope and pushed them into the frigid water. Fog swallowed them immediately, muffling every sound except the slow creak of oars and Saren's shallow breathing. She drifted in and out of consciousness, her face pale beneath streaks of dried salt water and blood. Kestrel curled against her, body trembling from pain but posture defiant, his gaze scanning the shifting white curtain around them. Harlan kept the skiff angled toward the faint outline of Whitestone Island, a jagged crescent of rock, pine, and memory rising from the Atlantic. The island emerged like a ghost. At its center stood Whitestone Lighthouse, a weather-beaten tower of gray stone, flanked by a squat cabin built decades earlier by Harlan's Uncle Rowan, a retired sailor whose gruff humor and wide grin had helped raise Harlan when his own parents worked long shifts on the mainland. Rowan had died years ago from heart complications, leaving the lighthouse to Harlan as a refuge he rarely returned to after Leora's death. Too many memories lived there, too much silence, but tonight it was the only safe ground he could imagine. Inside, the cabin air smelled of old cedar, salt, and dust. The stone fireplace, untouched since autumn, felt colder than the sea outside. Harlan set Saren gently on the patched leather couch, its cushions softened by time and age. He draped a wool blanket over her trembling form. Kestrel limped to her side, lowering his head onto her thigh as if staking a claim against the shadows of the world. When Saren finally stirred awake, her gray eyes sharpened instantly, still fogged with pain, but brimming with the reflexive alertness of someone conditioned never to sleep deeply. Her voice was rough when she spoke. "You shouldn't have brought me here." Harlan, kneeling beside the couch, held her gaze. "You would have bled out on that table." His tone was soft but immovable. "I already know what it's like to lose someone, because I didn't get there in time. I won't repeat that." Saren exhaled slowly, a mixture of exhaustion and reluctant acceptance. The tension in her jaw eased just enough to reveal the weight of her secret. "I wasn't attacked randomly," she murmured. "I'm being hunted." She told him about Lowell Crane, a maritime magnate with salt and pepper hair, cold green eyes, and charm so polished it gleamed like a sales pitch. To the public, he was a benefactor of coastal rescue charities and sponsor of emergency medical boats. But beneath the philanthropy lived a ruthless criminal mind. Crane had been, quietly, selling prototype maritime surveillance drones to offshore criminal groups. Saren, trained for covert infiltration, had joined a task unit designed to uncover the truth. She tracked Crane's ships for months, retrieving encrypted manifests. Then someone from within her own team, a man with a trimmed goatee and a habit of avoiding eye contact during debriefings, sold her location in exchange for a bribe she never saw coming. "They hit us at sea," Saren whispered, voice fraying. "My partner went under. I swam. Kestrel dragged me the last 100 yards. We made landfall near your pier. After that, I remember the cold and your hands." Harlan swallowed, feeling her pain like a stone dropped into the still water of his own guilt. He brushed ash from his palms and stood, pacing toward the frost-laced window. Outside, fog clung to the pines, making the world look like a painting smudged by sorrow. "If they're hunting you," he said, "they'll search every harbor, every cove." Seren pushed herself up on trembling elbows. "That's why I need to leave. You stay out of this, Mercer. You've already done enough." Harlan turned, eyes fierce with the quiet fire of a man who had once failed to save someone he loved and refused to fail again. "When Leora died," he began, voice low, "I stood on the shore wishing I had done more. If I walk away now, if I let the sea take another person right in front of me, I won't survive it." Seren stared at him, breath unsteady, walls she had spent years constructing fracturing at the edges. Kestrel lifted his head, amber eyes flicking between them as though reading the unspoken truth threading the cabin. They were no longer strangers tangled by accident, but three wounded souls held together by a storm-chosen bond. Outside, the lighthouse beacon flickered to life for the first time in months, a thin, wavering blade of light cutting the fog. In its glow, Harlan said quietly, "You're safe here tonight, and tomorrow we decide what comes next." For 3 days, the sky over Whitestone Island remained a cold, crystalline blue, the kind that sharpened every line of pine trees and made the Atlantic glitter like fractured glass. Inside the weather-beaten lighthouse cabin, warmth slowly returned to life in small and ordinary ways. Harlan Mercer, broad-shouldered, dark-haired with streaks of early silver, his quiet grief softening under new purpose, repaired the old generator behind the cabin. The machine sputtered at first, coughing up flecks of rust like a stubborn old animal, but with steady hands and patience learned from years of treating terrified creatures, he coaxed it back into a steady hum. The cabin lights flickered to life, a fragile glow, but a hopeful one. Seren Lockhart, still pale from blood loss but regaining strength through stubborn willpower, trained Kestrel outside on the narrow rocks. Even injured, she moved with the disciplined grace of a woman molded by fire, her athletic frame lean, powerful, and marked by faint scars that spoke of battles fought beyond this coastline. Her dark, blunt-cut hair whipped in the cold wind as she guided Kestrel across slippery patches of frost. The German shepherd, 4 years old, with a thick sable coat and amber eyes sharp as flint, limped but pushed through every command. Seren kept her voice calm, encouraging, because she knew what this was. Not just physical therapy, but a promise to the dog that they were not broken. Not yet. In the evenings, the three of them shared bowls of steaming clam chowder that filled the cabin with the smell of salt and garlic. There were moments, brief but real, when laughter escaped them, Harlan's low and rusty, Seren's short and surprised, as if she had forgotten what it sounded like. The lighthouse's stone walls, once heavy with silence and loss, slowly warmed to the fragile sense of belonging forming within. But peace never lasts for those being hunted. One dusk, the sky bruised purple and gold as the sun sank behind the pines. Seren stood on the lighthouse balcony with a pair of military-grade binoculars, a pair she had grabbed from her pack the night Harlan found her. She steadied her breath, scanning the horizon. The Atlantic rolled slow and dark beneath the thinning fog. Then she saw it. A tugboat, matte gray, squat and menacing, sat anchored far beyond the usual fishing grounds. Its AIS transponder was dead. Its deck lights were off. Only one figure stood on the bridge, a tall silhouette wrapped in a thick, dark coat, posture stiff, movements deliberate. Every few minutes he lifted binoculars toward the island. Seren's stomach tightened. Cranes closing the net. She descended the metal stairs, each clang echoing like a warning, and found Harlan chopping wood beside the cabin. He looked up immediately, noticing the sharpness in her eyes. "What is it?" "A tugboat. Wrong place. Wrong behavior." Her voice dropped to a hard whisper. "They're here." Harlan's jaw clenched, but he didn't panic. Instead, he looked toward the sea with a steadiness carved from grief and resolve. "Then we call your captain, Ridley, right? Radio's useless, phones, too easy to track." Saren exhaled, frustration shadowing her expression. "We need a clean device." Harlan nodded. "I'll go." Saren's head snapped up. "No, you can't risk it." "I've lived here my whole life," he said quietly. "I know every alley in town, every blind turn in the harbor. They don't." Kestrel growled softly, tail stiff, clearly echoing Saren's refusal, but Harlan only knelt, running a hand over the dog's thick neck. "I'll come back, I promise." Early the next morning, with the tide low and fog hugging the water like a wary spirit, Harlan rode through the mist toward Mariner's Hollow. His breath fogged the air, ice clung to his beard. He kept his movements smooth, avoiding sound. By the time he reached the harbor, the town was alive with color. The winter festival, strings of warm lights illuminated rows of red and white booths. Children in wool hats chased each other across the pier. Musicians played folk songs beside a towering evergreen draped in ribbons. It looked peaceful. He knew better. Inside the electronics shop, a cramped room cluttered with radios, spare wiring, and tourist phone chargers, Harlan bought a cheap flip phone from a clerk named Elliot Baines, a lanky 22-year-old with sandy hair and freckles. Elliot had an easy grin and a clumsy friendliness that bordered on endearing. "Cold day, Doc Mercer," he chirped. "Festival's great tonight. You should stay for the cider." "Another time," Harlan murmured, paying in cash. The moment he stepped outside, his instincts prickled. He angled his head just enough to catch the bakery window's reflection. A man stood 3 storefronts away, tall, lean but strong, wrapped in an olive-green coat dusted with snow. His knit cap was pulled low, obscuring much of his face except for a sharp jawline darkened by stubble. His stance was too casual, his hands too still. His eyes, cold, pale hazel, tracked Harlan with the detached precision of a hunter. Harlan's pulse quickened, but his expression remained neutral. He blended into the flow of festival-goers, his broad frame weaving past families, musicians, and couples huddled beneath blankets. Bells chimed, firelight flickered, laughter hid danger. The man followed. Harlan slipped between 2 parade floats, ducked into a narrow cobblestone street leading up the hill, and entered St. Ashwin's Chapel, an old stone church with stained-glass windows muted by winter dust. He used to stand here after Leora's death, hands clasped, searching for absolution that never came. Tonight, the chapel offered something different: cover. He moved down the aisle past wooden pews worn smooth by decades of kneeling fishermen and slipped through the side door into the cold stone corridor. The corridor descended into a storage tunnel, an old escape passage from the town's shipwreck era that exited behind the cemetery. When Harlan emerged among the frost-coated gravestones, the harbor lights glimmered far below. He cut through a row of sleeping pines, looped around a deserted boat shed, and approached his skiff from the opposite direction. The man in the olive coat never appeared again. Fog embraced him as he rowed back to Whitestone. Inside the lighthouse cabin, Seren was waiting by the oil lamp, shoulder still stiff but posture taut with worry. She rose the moment she saw him. "You were followed." "I lost him," Harlan said, setting the new phone on the table. "Use it, quickly." Saren powered on the cheap device and dialed a number from memory. After 2 rings, a woman answered. A deep, authoritative voice that carried the rasp of years spent shouting over rotor blades and engines. Captain Naomi Ridley, Saren's mentor. A formidable figure even through a phone line. Ridley was a woman in her early 50s, tall and iron-featured with silver-streaked black hair usually pulled into a severe bun. She had once been known for her unwavering discipline, and her uncanny ability to read people like open books. Her leadership style was blunt, protective, and shaped by losing half her unit in an explosion years earlier, a tragedy that carved her heart into something diamond hard. When Seren said, "I'm alive," there was a beat of silence so heavy it felt like grief exhaling. Then Ridley's voice cracked, not with weakness, but with anger disguised as relief. "Where are you?" "Whitestone Island, I have evidence." "Crane's still moving product." Ridley hissed out a curse. "I knew that bastard wasn't clean. Listen carefully, Lockhart. I'm pulling strings for a covert retrieval. A disguised Coast Guard cutter will approach your waters in 24 hours. You must stay hidden until then." 24 hours on an island, Seren murmured. "That's a long time." "It's the best I can do without alerting Crane." Ridley's tone softened slightly. "Hold the line, Seren. I'm coming for you." When the call ended, the cabin fell silent. The oil lamp flickered. Kestrel pressed against Seren's leg, sensing the weight settling over them. Harlan looked toward the dark window. "We just need to survive one more day." Seren exhaled, her gray eyes meeting his with a frost-edged certainty. One more day. Against Crane's men, that's a lifetime. And outside, unseen but inevitable, the gray tugboat adjusted its position in the bay, closing in for the kill. The storm rolled in just after nightfall, swallowing Whitestone Island in darkness so complete it felt carved from pitch. Atlantic winds howled like grieving spirits, slamming against the lighthouse tower until the stone itself groaned. Lightning tore the sky into jagged shards, illuminating the churning sea for a heartbeat at a time. Then the generator coughed, sputtered, and died completely, plunging the island into a silence broken only by thunder and the crash of waves against the cliffs. Seren Lockhart moved calmly through the cabin, her athletic silhouette sharpened by the occasional flash of lightning. Her dark hair, still slightly damp from the fog earlier, clung to her cheekbones. She extinguished the fire, pulled thick curtains tight, and checked every window latch by touch alone. Kestrel, a 4-year-old German shepherd with a sable coat and intelligent amber eyes, followed her movements silently despite the faint tremor in his injured ribs. Harlan Mercer, broad-shouldered and weary, stood in the kitchen gripping the shotgun Seren had placed in his hands. His beard was wet with storm mist, his breath unsteady as he listened, really listened, to what Seren was training him for. She stood behind him, close enough for her presence to anchor his fear. "Finger off the trigger until you're certain," she murmured, her calm voice cutting through the chaos outside. "Center, mass. Don't aim for limbs. They don't stop people." Her hand rested briefly on his, steadying him. "If they reach the stairs, you're the last line." Almost on cue, the sound arrived. The distant, guttural throttle of small boat engines forcing their way against the wind. Seren's jaw tightened. She moved to the window and saw faint bobbing shadows against the lightning-lit sea. Inflatable assault craft drifting toward the rocks. Lowell Crane had found them. Within minutes, the island erupted in quiet danger. Metal clanged. Boots slipped on wet stone. Soft, clipped orders in coarse whispers. Seren motioned for Harlan to stay behind the overturned table she'd dragged into place as cover. She slid a combat knife into her belt, checked her sidearm, and melted into the shadows as if she'd been born from them. The first breach team slammed into the lower door of the lighthouse cabin, 3 men in dark tactical clothing, faces hidden by storm masks. Even in the dim flashes of lightning, Harlan saw how professional they were, coordinated, silent, ruthless. Kestrel reacted first. Though pain radiated through his flank, the dog pressed low to the ground, nose twitching. The moment the door burst open and a mercenary stepped through, Kestrel lunged with a burst of fury that defied every wound. His jaws clamped onto the man's forearm, dragging him off balance so the rifle fired harmlessly into the stone ceiling instead of directly into Harlan's chest. Kestrel down, Saren shouted from somewhere near the stairs, her voice sharp, tactical. The dog dropped, rolling aside just as Saren opened fire from the shadows of the stairwell. Her shot hit the second man's center mass. He fell backward into the storm wind, collapsing into the mud just outside. The narrow stairwell acted exactly as Saren intended, a bottleneck. No matter how many men Crane sent, they could only climb single file. Saren fired again, a short, controlled burst that dropped another mercenary halfway up the steps. She moved with ruthless precision, leaning, firing, disappearing, using the old lighthouse architecture like a weapon, but Crane had anticipated resistance. Another squad circled up the rocky incline outside, climbing toward the base of the lighthouse tower itself, searching for a vantage point. And then he appeared. Lowell Crane stepped onto the highest outcropping, his silhouette cutting sharply against the storm-churned sky. He wore a long charcoal coat that seemed absurdly elegant amidst the rain and lightning. Crane's silver-streaked hair was plastered to his forehead, but his posture remained regal. An aging king of corruption surveying a battlefield he believed he owned. Two mercenaries flanked him. A third held a high-powered tactical light that illuminated Saren and Harlan from below, turning them into exposed silhouettes. Crane raised his pistol at Harlan, eyes narrowing with cold amusement. "Kill the dog first," Crane ordered, voice smooth, unshaken by the storm. "Then finish the witnesses." Saren froze. She could shoot, but not 3 men before they got their shots off. And if she fired, Harlan and Kestrel would be the first to fall. Slowly, painfully, she set her gun down on the slick stone and lifted her hands. A muscle in her jaw twitched, the only sign of the rage boiling inside her. "Let them go," she said. "I'm the one you want." Crane smiled, a small, victorious curl of the lips that made Harlan grip the shotgun tighter. "Dear girl," Crane said, voice slicing through the wind, "I intend to take you, but loose ends must be trimmed." A wave hurled itself against the cliffs. The seconds stretched. Then the horizon exploded with light. A blinding sweep of white cut through the storm as a large Coast Guard cutter surged into view from behind the rain curtain. Its floodlights snapped on at full power, turning the cliffs into a stage of shadows. Engines thundered, sirens howled. From above, a Navy helicopter rose like a ghost behind the ridge, spotlight pinning Crane's men in place. A voice boomed from the helicopter's speaker, strong, low, unmistakably commanding. "This is the United States Navy. Drop your weapons immediately or we will open fire." Crane jerked around, panic finally cracking his mask. In desperation, he pivoted toward Saren, raising his gun to kill her before he lost everything. A single, precise gunshot rang out. Crane screamed as his pistol flew from his hand, fingers bloodied. The shot hadn't come from the cutter. It hadn't come from the helicopter. It came from the tree line on the ridge above. Captain Naomi Ridley emerged from the shadows, rain streaming off her military-issue raincoat. Her tall, iron-built frame was unmistakable, gray-streaked hair plastered to her face, eyes burning with cold purpose. She held a suppressed marksman rifle steady in her powerful arms, her expression carved from stone. "Step away from my operator," Ridley growled. Within seconds, Navy operators fast-roped down the cliff, securing Crane's mercenaries with silent, methodical precision. Crane himself was dragged to his knees, soaked, shaking, and defeated. Meanwhile, a pair of medics sprinted toward Harlan, Saren, and Kestrel, finding them bruised, bleeding, caked in sea spray and mud, but alive. Shocked, but alive. Saren dropped to one knee beside Kestrel, running a trembling hand over his fur. Harlan sagged beside her, chest heaving from adrenaline and terror. Ridley approached slowly, lowering her weapon as she looked at Saren with a rare crack in her fierce composure. "You held the line," Ridley said softly. Saren swallowed hard, only because they did. Lightning flashed. Then the darkness settled again, this time without fear, March arrived in Maine with a sky so clear it looked carved from polished ice, and the Atlantic lay calm and silvered beneath the pale morning light. Winter had finally slipped away, leaving only the clean scent of thawing cedar and salt. Serenity, real serenity, not the tense quiet of hiding, had returned to Whitestone Island and the small harbor town across the bay. The Harbor Light Animal Clinic, once scarred by battle, stood renewed. Its front door had been repainted a soft seafoam green that glowed warmly each time sunlight touched it. The shattered frame from the night of Crane's attack had been replaced, but Harlan Mercer kept a small piece of the original wood mounted on the interior wall. The jagged fragment, darkened by time and salt, served as a modest memorial to the night that changed everything, a symbol of survival rather than fear. News of Lowell Crane's downfall had come quietly, delivered in a simple beige envelope from Washington. Crane, once a titan of maritime philanthropy, was now charged with treason, arms trafficking, and conspiracy against the nation he claimed to support. His empire had dissolved, his influence stripped away. He awaited a lifetime behind concrete walls. Harlan read the letter only once, then handed it to Seren Lockhart, who held it with fingers that no longer trembled. Seren had healed slowly, her athletic frame regaining strength through relentless grit. Her shoulder scar had settled into a pale line that disappeared beneath her shirt. The faint bruises under her eyes had faded, and when her discharge papers finally arrived, they bore a medal she barely glanced at and a promotion she never accepted. She had walked into the military office in Portland with her dark hair tied back neatly, her posture still proud, and simply said, "My mission is over. I want to learn how to live instead of how to fight." The officer processing her papers had nodded, quietly, as though recognizing the bravery in that decision. And so Harlan brought Seren and Kestrel back to Whitestone, not as fugitives, but as builders of something new. The lighthouse cottage had transformed under their care. Harlan tore out every rotten plank on the porch and replaced them with thick, sanded boards, smelling faintly of pine tar. Seren helped him install a new railing, her grip steady, her movements fluid despite the occasional stiffness in her left shoulder. They fixed the shutters, cleared the storage rooms, scraped away salt deposits from the old stone walls, and repainted the lighthouse's spiral staircase until it gleamed under the lantern glow. Even the lighthouse beacon had changed. What was once a desperate signal of hiding had been repaired and repurposed. A warm, reliable guide for small fishing boats drifting near fog banks. Harlan wired the new lamp carefully, his hands steady, his gray-blue eyes softening each time Seren entered the room, with a mug of tea or a small smile she never would have allowed herself months ago. Kestrel had found his own rhythm on the island. The 4-year-old German shepherd, still proud even with a slight limp, chased gulls across the rocky shore with the enthusiasm of a creature who finally understood he was safe. His amber eyes remained sharp, but no longer haunted. Each time he trotted to Seren's side, she knelt and pressed her forehead to his, whispering thanks only he could hear. One evening, as the sky dimmed into a wash of gold and rose, colors that mirrored the dawn Seren once described atop Mount Rainier, Harlan and Seren sat on the restored wooden steps. Kestrel sprawled between them, his head resting heavily across both of their boots, like he was claiming them with silent certainty. The air smelled of salt, cedar, and the faint warmth of a fire inside. The world was soft, peaceful, earned. Harlan cleared his throat, awkward in that gentle way that revealed his shyness more than any words. He pulled a small leather collar from his pocket, a new one, sturdy, hand-stitched. The old tactical collar, frayed and darkened by stormwater and battle, lay beside him on the step. Slowly he unfastened it and replaced it with the new one, his hands trembling just slightly. Seren watched him, curiosity shifting into something deeper. When she saw the silver tag, he turned toward her. 3 names were etched into the metal with clean, purposeful strokes: Saren, Harlan, Kestrel, Whitestone Lighthouse, landline. Saren inhaled sharply. "This isn't just his tag," she whispered. "No," Harlan murmured. His voice was rough, unpolished, shaped by months of quiet grief and new hope. "It's us. I don't make promises I can't keep, Saren. I'm not good with speeches. I'm not good with big words, but I know this." He looked at the lighthouse beacon glowing faintly behind them. "This pack isn't complete without you. I don't want to watch the sea alone anymore." A tear slid down Saren's cheek, rare, quiet, and shining. She cupped his face with a hand that had once broken down steel doors and disarmed explosives, now soft with tenderness. Her gray eyes were no longer sharp with vigilance. They were calm, warm, open. "I've spent half my life walking into wars," she said softly. "If God pulled us out of that storm alive, maybe he's showing me where I'm supposed to stop running." They shifted onto the old porch swing Harlan had repaired weeks earlier. The wood creaked beneath them in a familiar, comforting rhythm. Kestrel curled beneath their legs, one ear flicking lazily toward the sound of gulls returning to their roosts. Above them, the lighthouse lantern clicked on, its soft glow sweeping the darkening ocean, not as a distress signal, but as a promise of safe harbor. The three of them watched the first stars rise, each dot of light mirrored on the calm Atlantic. No gunfire, no shadows stalking the cliffs, no engines cutting through the night. Only wind, only waves, only the steady shared heartbeat of a pack that had endured the storm and stepped into a second chance. And in that golden blue dusk, Saren leaned her head gently onto Harlan's shoulder, letting the final walls inside her fall quietly away. In the quiet glow of Whitestone Lighthouse, where a battered soldier found her peace, a grieving doctor found his courage, and a faithful German shepherd guarded the last thread of hope, we are reminded of something timeless. Miracles do not always come in flashes of lightning. Sometimes they arrive as people who refuse to give up on us. Sometimes they come as dogs who love beyond fear. And sometimes they come as the small, steady light that God kindles in the darkest night. Life gives us storms, storms of loss, storms of fear, storms of loneliness. But the same God who calmed the Sea of Galilee still whispers into our chaos, "You are not alone. You are not forgotten. I will guide you home." Maybe your storm is different from Saren's battles. Maybe your loss is quieter than Harlan's grief. But the same light that saved them can reach your life too. From the hospital bed, from the empty kitchen chair, from the long winter nights when sleep will not come, if this story touched something in your heart, a memory, a scar, or a prayer you've been carrying for too long, please share it with someone you love. You never know whose storm you might calm. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from, or simply write Amen to claim God's protection over your home, your family, and everyone you love. And if you believe, as we do, that second chances are real, that loyalty still matters, and that God still sends his angels, sometimes with boots, sometimes with fur, please subscribe to the channel so we can continue bringing you stories of hope, courage, and faith. May the Lord bless you and keep you tonight. May his light shine over your home. May his angels stand guard at your door, and may you always, always remember, even in the darkest storm, God's lighthouse is still shining for you.